talk is really great because U-turn is just about to launch a study into the cost of homelessness in Cape Town. And if anyone is interested, that you can go to read it more. There's an executive summary there that you can go and delve into. But in short, this is a summary of the findings and some of those key findings. So within Cape Town, we estimate that there's around 14,000 people who are homeless, and within the South African context, we say homeless we mean rough sleepers or street sleepers. So individuals who are living under bridges, in parkways, in shop doorways, etc. Of course, the vast majority of South Africans live in informal settlements. And so I know that within an international context, that word homeless is a very, very ambiguous word, but that's what we mean within the South African context. And we find that the study has found that on average, individuals in Cape Town who are on the streets have been there for about 8.5 years. 50% of those are from either mental health, poor mental health, or addiction. And so with that terminology and with those results, really you could say that the majority of people on the streets of South Africa are what would be called chronically homeless. And why that is important is because it directly relates to the cost of homelessness in Cape Town. And when we speak about the cost of homelessness, we mean the very obvious financial cost of homelessness. What does it cost society to be in this situation? But also, what does it cost in terms of socially and in terms of the cost of the human life on the streets? And the fact that the majority of the people on those streets are chronically homeless indicates the real cost to human life. But what was interesting for us was finding that even at a conservative estimate, around 744 million is being spent on homelessness in Cape Town. So it really eliminates quite a lot of the budget that might be attributed to homelessness, like rehabilitation centers, etc. So it is a conservative estimate. And what was really quite poignant and really telling for us was that 45% of that spend was going to reactive, punitive law enforcement security measures. So in other words, reacting to the problem rather than actually addressing the problem and trying to find a solution to reduce it. And so if one keeps in mind that there is a vast majority of people who are chronically homeless on the streets of Cape Town, and that the spend is going to just reaction rather than solution, what is clear is that within the Cape Town context, if we continue in this way, that the problem will continue to grow, and certainly we are seeing growth. If the estimate of 14,000 is accurate, from the last census done by the city of Cape Town, the last census put it at around, probably around 6,000, and before that, around 4,000. So the problem is growing in South Africa, Cape Town. And so where does that leave us looking at it from a U-turn perspective? U-turn for a very long time has taken an approach which is really trying to shift society away from a short-term solution, so away from what we call in Cape Town, what I like to call your cup of soup and blanket approach. So I find not just within the South African context, but probably internationally too, that when one uses the word homeless, one tends to get a welfare response, so a welfare relief response. And as we know, relief is really a short-term thing. So relief is really something that you're wanting to do in an emergency situation, not in an ongoing way. However, it seems when it comes to homelessness, we get caught in the cycle of relief where we're simply giving a cup of soup and a blanket and really not shifting the situation for the individual in that difficult situation. And it tends to be a cheaper solution, but what the study highlights is that in the short term, it is cheaper. In the long term, it becomes considerably more expensive, exponentially more expensive, and that really everyone benefits if we invest in a long-term solution. And so what do we mean by a long-term solution? Well, this is really a very, very summarized version of that. I'm just going to minimize the faces. So this is really a summarized version of it. Obviously, there are incredible intricacies that go into this, and it's taken us a good 22 years to get from first contact, point one, all the way through to employment, and significantly to having 80% of our graduates remain employed and sober. This entire program is tracked in a database. So we use something called Salesforce, and every step of this journey is tracked in that database. So from first contact, individuals on the street make their way to U-turn Service Center. We have 2 service centers currently, one in an area called Claremont in Cape Town, another in Mitchell's Plain. And we're looking to add more service centers so that we're able to reach more people. And the way that they access our service center is through a voucher. So members of the public purchase vouchers, and instead of giving, R5 or cash as an emotional knee-jerk reaction to an individual seeking assistance, they give a voucher. And the reason that that's significant is because the voucher will entitle the person to redeem it for basic needs. So they're able to access food, as well as come into a secondhand shop and access clothing through the voucher, and able to choose the clothing that fits them and that they need, rather than having yet another jacket that they're needing to lug around. So it's really trying to address their specific needs. But more importantly, we really see that as literally the first initial contact. So it doesn't end at a cup of soup, and it certainly doesn't end at a blanket. Those are really designed to have the first interaction, to take care of the basic needs that an individual is not caught in a cycle of basic survival, and that they're able to start progressing up Maslow's pyramid to some of the higher elements of working on themselves and trying to really dig deep into why they're in that situation and whether they want to be in that situation. And if they don't want to be in that situation, what can they do about it? And so they access their basic needs, and through those interactions, we really get to know individuals. So a relationship of trust is formed. We never give a package of food away and for people to take that food away from the center, because we want them to sit with us. We want to sit alongside individuals and have a conversation and get to know them. And the very first time a person approaches us through that service center, we do a baseline survey. So we are looking at things like their education history, their employment history, their addiction history, their family relationships, their where they are predominantly based. And that baseline survey goes into this database in Salesforce. And then every service instance thereafter is tracked. Every meal and every conversation is tracked all the way through until eventually graduation, and actually beyond, because we check in 6 months after graduation, and that's also logged in the database. And it's through those interactions in first phase that we really start to get to know the individual. We start to screen them for the next step in that journey, which is drug and alcohol rehabilitation support. And the vast majority of individuals who come to us through the service center certainly need to go through that step. I don't know if that is relevant for the whole of South Africa. Cape Town currently has the highest rate of addiction, as well as the highest rate of gangsterism. So that might be different if you're going up into Johannesburg, where you might find that a lot of the individuals who find themselves stranded on the streets are really a lot of foreign workers who are simply caught in a difficult situation, and a situation where the South African government is really not making it easy for them to find work and find accommodation. But within the Cape Town context, between 70 to 90% of those individuals certainly are struggling with addiction. And so we then screen them for drug and alcohol rehab. Our rehabilitation, we do through an outpatient program funded by the city. So U-turn doesn't run the rehab, we case manage it. So we refer them to the outpatient program, and we then pay for their transport to rehab, as well as the cost of their shelter during that time, because although the city's done a great job of providing outpatient rehab, they haven't really considered the practicalities of an individual who is homeless, who does not have funding to get to the rehabilitation every day, nor do they have accommodation. And so if they weren't being supported by U-turn in a shelter, would be camped out under a tree or under a bridge alongside individuals still using, which would obviously compromise their ability to successfully complete the rehabilitation. So we case manage it, and we have quite an exciting result there. So we've got currently around an 80% successful rehabilitation rate. It's sufficiently interesting for the South African Medical Research Council to be writing a white paper on it. And really it comes down to, I think, having in place some very strong pillars to support the individual. We are a faith-based organization, and that may play an element in it. I think it will be difficult to put it in black and white, but certainly the US Centers for Addiction have found that there is on average a 30 to 40% success rate for drug and alcohol rehab. But if one adds that equation, a belief in something greater than oneself, that seems to go up to 60%. And there's a third-party organization doing the study. They're not a religious organization. So it potentially has something to do with our 80% success rate. But the problem is that you then have an individual who has done the hard work on themselves to kick the habits and to kick the drugs and to come clean. And you then have on average around a 60% relapse rate. And most rehabilitation programs really just end there. So they celebrate the fact that you've done the hard work of rehabilitating yourself, and then they send you off back into the world to go and live your life. And you then have quite a waste of resources, because 60% of those individuals will relapse, which is really not sensible in terms of effective use of resources, but also not effective in terms of the individual, because there really is a strong chance that the individual will not make that journey again. And so U-turn feels quite strongly that there is a strong responsibility for individuals, organizations, and for programs to see someone through completely until they're in a state of resilience and are able to maintain sobriety and maintain the hard work that they've put in. And so that really is step 3 in U-turn's program. And so we call that step Life Change. It's the Life Change program. And really what the Life Change program is a sheltered employment space. So we have social enterprises around Cape Town. They are essentially charity shops, secondhand clothing shops and bric-a-brac shops. And we have bins all across Cape Town where community members drop off the clothing that they're not using. We have people who then go and collect those bins. Those bins take the clothing to a sorting area, it gets laundered, and then it gets dispersed off to these various shops. There's about 6 or 7 across Cape Town. Currently, the shops in this whole enterprise is not profit-making by any means, but it does help to supplement the cost of what we're doing. And what we're doing is providing training grounds. So every single individual who works in the shop, from the top all the way down, is formerly homeless and has been and is on our program, is currently on our Life Change program. And so we provide sheltered employment, we provide on-the-job training, and then one day a week, each one of those individuals comes into the training center where they come for personal development, and we then provide formal training. So they're doing things like computer literacy, because if you're working in a shop, you need to be able to do stock taking. If you're doing stock taking, you need to be able to work with Excel sheets. You need to be able to handle emails and do internet research to figure out how pricing should be done. So they're doing formal training in computer literacy. Some of them are doing basic literacy as part of their formal training program. A lot of the individuals who come to us have between a grade 8 and a grade 10 education, and despite that are not able to read. They are practically illiterate. And so we then provide basic literacy so that by the time they graduate, they are literate as an essential step towards maintaining employment. And then we do things like communication, life skills programs around parenting, money management, anger management, and each one of them has a personal occupational therapist. Each OT has a caseload of about 12 to 15 individuals, and they see their personal OT and are able to talk through issues, because an individual who lands up on the streets, certainly on the streets of Cape Town, generally has quite a lot of work that they're needing to work through. And they're needing really practical skills about how to deal with the issues that they are dealing with. And so U-turn has also pioneered that, working with OTs rather than social workers or psychologists. And it was an interesting choice, and it is one that's proved very effective. And we now actually train OTs. We work and run training workshops with OTs with other organizations such as MESS, which is another large organization based in Cape Town, working in the same sector. So that's your change program. And on average, that third step, the life change program, lasts around 18 to 24 months. We are very much trying to reduce the amount of that time. We would like to bring it down to 1 year because it would allow for greater funding and allow us to grow the number of people that we could have on that program. But the key thing is that although we want to bring down the amount of time spent in third phase, we certainly don't want to compromise the outcomes. And the outcomes are step 4, which is ultimately employment in the open labor market, where you fly the nest, as it were. And so in consultation with your therapist, we then decide if a person is ready to head off into the world. There are certain key points that they're looking at for resilience. And when the therapist is satisfied that those elements are being ticked, we then support them in exiting the program. And the way that we do that is through providing career advice. We provide CV writing skills and interviewing skills. And it's then up to the individual in this exit phase to look for a job, apply for that job, and secure that job independently of us. We'll support them through it. We'll maintain them in the sheltered employment until they find that permanent position. And once they secure that position, we put a graduation hat on their head and a certificate in their hands, and there's a ceremony, and we really celebrate that moment. And the individual flies off into the open labor markets and independent living. And about 6 months later, we then check in with them. And we're looking at 3 key indicators. We're looking at, are they employed? Are they sober? Are they independently housed? And by independent housing, you mean brick and mortar, paid for rent. So not a halfway house, not a Wendy house in someone's backyard, but secure, stable accommodation. And for the last 3 years, 80% of our graduates have remained employed, have remained sober, and 79% have remained in formal independent accommodation, which is really quite an exciting figure, given that there is a very serious lack of low-income housing in South Africa. And so that's really, in a nutshell, the solution that we put in place. It really has taken many years to formulate this in an ongoing, continually refined way, really relying heavily on data to guide us through the process. And we still rely heavily on that data. We see bottlenecks, for example, between first phase and second phase from the data and start to address it. Take the feedback from our participants. There's a lot of conversations that happen with the actual individuals on the program about their experience all the way from phase 1 through to phase 4. And we're always looking to improve that. But as far as I know, it is one of the most effective solutions I've seen so far to homelessness. It's why I consciously chose to work with U-turn, because I find the solution to really be quite exciting and something that has relevance, I think, to the global situation. Homelessness, as we all know, is on the rise globally. It is not an African problem. And so, yeah, in a nutshell, that is that.